I never imagined the biggest threat to my marriage would be my wife's assistant. My wife, Victoria Grant, ran a growing company. I supported her from the beginning. Long nights, endless meetings, constant pressure. I was proud of everything she built. Then there was Brandon Pierce. At first I ignored him. He was always around Victoria. Always talking. Always smiling. Always acting like he belonged beside her. One morning, I walked into Victoria's office, carrying lunch. Brandon was already there. "Victoria, you skipped breakfast again," he said. Victoria laughed. "I know. I'm terrible." I set the food down. "That's why I brought lunch." Brandon looked at me. "Oh, good. At least someone is handling the domestic side of things." Victoria smiled at her laptop. I forced a grin. "Someone has to." Brandon chuckled. "I guess that's true." The conversation moved on. Mine didn't. A few days later, we attended a company event. The moment Victoria entered the room, Brandon appeared beside her. Employees gathered around them. I stood nearby. Nobody said anything rude. Nobody had to. Brandon made me feel invisible. Every time someone asked Victoria a question, he answered first. Every time she laughed, he was there. Every time I stepped closer, he somehow filled the space between us. On the drive home, I finally spoke. "Do you think Brandon crosses boundaries sometimes?" Victoria glanced at me. "What boundaries?" "The way he acts around you." She sighed. "Not this again. I'm serious. He's my assistant. He acts like more than that." Victoria shook her head. "He's loyal to the company." That doesn't answer my question. It answers enough. I looked out the window. She didn't understand. Or maybe she didn't want to. A week later, I met my younger sister, Chloe, for coffee. The second I mentioned Brandon, she rolled her eyes. "That guy. You noticed it too?" "Everyone notices it." I leaned forward. "Then why does Victoria ignore it?" Chloe shrugged. "Because nobody challenges him." "What do you mean?" "He likes testing limits." "Testing limits?" "Seeing what he can get away with." I frowned. "That's a dangerous game." Chloe nodded. "Exactly." Her words stayed with me. After that, I paid closer attention. The more I watched, the worse it became. Brandon interrupted me constantly. If I told a story, he corrected details. If I made a joke, he added a better one. If Victoria asked for an opinion, he somehow gave his first. One evening, we attended a business dinner. A guest asked how Victoria managed stress. Before she could answer, Brandon spoke. "She survives because she never settles." The guest laughed. "What does that mean?" Brandon grinned. "It means Victoria is ambitious. She always wants more." His eyes flicked toward me. Only for a second. But I noticed. So did he. Later that night, I confronted Victoria again. "We need to talk." She looked exhausted. "About Brandon?" "Yes." She rubbed her forehead. "Ryan, please. He's disrespecting me." "You're exaggerating." "No, I'm not. He jokes around. At my expense." "You're reading too much into it." I stared at her. "What if someone treated you this way?" She hesitated. "That's different." "Why?" No answer came. That silence hurt more than any argument. Days passed. Then came the charity gala, the biggest event of the year. Business leaders filled the ballroom. Investors, partners, reporters. Everyone important was there. Victoria looked incredible in her evening gown. I felt proud standing beside her. For a while, everything seemed normal. Then Brandon grabbed a microphone. The room quieted. He started thanking sponsors, making jokes, telling stories. People laughed. I relaxed. Then he looked toward our table. "Victoria deserves special recognition." Applause filled the room. Victoria smiled politely. Brandon continued. "She's the hardest working person I've ever met." More applause. "She never stops pushing forward." People nodded. Then his smile changed. Just slightly. The kind of smile that warned trouble was coming. "Honestly, she deserves someone with the same level of ambition." A few people laughed. Others looked uncomfortable. My chest tightened. Brandon raised his glass. "Someone who can truly keep up with her." The laughter spread. Awkward. Uneasy. Embarrassed. Every person in that room knew exactly who he meant. I looked around. Nobody met my eyes. Victoria sat frozen. For 1 second, I waited for her to stop him. She didn't. Brandon took another sip. Still smiling. Still enjoying himself. I stood. The room became quiet. Brandon looked pleased, like he had finally gotten the reaction he wanted. I smiled. Not because I was happy. Because I suddenly understood something. For months, I thought Brandon was arrogant. For months, I thought he was immature. For months, I thought he simply lacked respect. I was wrong. This wasn't carelessness. This wasn't bad humor. This wasn't a misunderstanding. He had a goal. Every interruption, every joke, every insult, every boundary he crossed, they were deliberate. He wasn't trying to impress Victoria. He wasn't trying to prove himself. He was trying to replace me. I looked directly at him. For the first time, his confidence felt different. Like he expected me to break. Like he expected me to walk away. Instead, I smiled wider. Because the moment I finally understood his game was the moment I stopped being his target and became his problem. I did not confront Brandon after the charity gala. That was exactly what he wanted. Instead, I watched. I listened. I paid attention. The more I observed him, the more uncomfortable I became. He was involved in everything, not just company business. Victoria's personal life, too. One morning, I called Victoria 3 times. No answer. An hour later, she finally returned my call. Sorry. Busy morning. I figured. Was it important? Not really. Later that day, I visited her office. Brandon sat behind his desk. I stopped. Did Victoria get my messages? He looked up. Which ones? The calls this morning. Oh, those. Something about his tone irritated me. What about them? I told her she was busy. I stared at him. You told her not to call me back? I prioritized her schedule. My call isn't your decision to make. He smiled. I'm just doing my job. I walked away before I said something I would regret. That conversation stayed with me. Over the next few weeks, I noticed more things. Brandon controlled every meeting, every appointment, every invitation, every message. Employees rarely spoke to Victoria directly. Everything went through Brandon first. It was like he had built a wall around her, and nobody questioned it. One evening, I met my best friend Nathan Reed. Nathan listened quietly while I explained everything. When I finished, he leaned back. That sounds bad. It is bad, but you're still missing something. What? People like Brandon never stop at influence. I frowned. What are you saying? I'm saying there's always a bigger reason. You think he's after Victoria? Nathan shook his head. I think he's after something else. I looked at him. Can you help me find out? Nathan smiled. I was hoping you'd ask. Over the next month, Nathan started digging. Carefully, quietly. Neither of us wanted rumors. We wanted facts. The first thing he uncovered surprised me. Employees were talking. A lot. One afternoon, Nathan called me. You need to hear this. What happened? I spoke with 3 managers. And they all think you're getting divorced. I nearly dropped my phone. What? That's what they're hearing. From who? You already know. I clenched my jaw. Brandon. Nathan sighed. Looks that way. I felt sick. The rumors spread throughout the company. People whispered behind closed doors. Some believed Victoria and I were already separated. Others thought we stayed together only for appearances. None of it was true, yet somehow everyone seemed convinced. A few days later, I attended a company luncheon. As I walked through the dining area, 2 employees suddenly stopped talking. They looked embarrassed. I sat beside them. One forced a smile. Good afternoon, Ryan. Afternoon. Silence followed. Then I asked the question. What were you discussing? Neither answered. That told me everything. That night, I confronted Victoria. We sat across from each other at dinner. I need to ask you something. She looked tired. What now? Have you heard the divorce rumors? Her expression changed. What rumors? The rumors about us. Victoria frowned. I haven't heard anything. They're all over your company. She put down her fork. And you think Brandon started them? I know he did. Do you have proof? No. Then you're making assumptions. I stared at her. You really don't see what's happening? She sighed heavily. Ryan. No. Tell me. You're obsessed with him. I froze. What? Every conversation becomes about Brandon. Because he's causing problems. Or because you're jealous. The words hit harder than I expected. I'm not jealous. You act like it. I looked away. For a moment I could not speak. After everything I had seen. After everything he had done. That was her answer. Jealous. Insecure. Paranoid. The disappointment hurt more than anger ever could. A week later, the company held a business retreat. Senior executives attended. Investors joined remotely. Victoria asked me to come. I almost declined. Then I changed my mind. I wanted to see Brandon in his natural environment. The first day started smoothly. Meetings, presentations, planning sessions. Then everything changed during a strategy discussion. One executive asked for my opinion about expanding into a new market. I share my thoughts. I think slower growth creates less risk. Several executives nodded. Before anyone else could respond, Brandon laughed. Actually laughed. I turned toward him. You disagree? Completely. The room became quiet. Brandon leaned forward. Playing safe is why companies fall behind. One executive shifted uncomfortably. I remained calm. Calculated growth isn't fear. It's hesitation. No, it's discipline. Brandon smirked. That's one way to describe it. I noticed executives exchanging glances. Brandon continued. If Victoria followed that mindset, this company would be half its size. The room fell silent. He was not challenging my opinion. He was challenging me. Directly. Publicly. Victoria said nothing. Again, the meeting eventually moved on. But Brandon looked pleased with himself. Too pleased. That evening Nathan called. His voice sounded different. Excited. Focused. Ryan, I found something. I stepped outside onto the hotel balcony. What is it? It's Brandon. What about him? He's been moving money. I stiffened. What kind of money? Company funds. My heart started racing. Explain. Nathan lowered his voice. I found irregular payments. Are you sure? Very sure. How much? Enough to matter. I looked across the dark parking lot. Suddenly, every piece started fitting together. The rumors, the manipulation, the control, the constant need for influence. None of it was about love. None of it was about Victoria. It was about power. Power over employees. Power over information. Power over decisions. Power over money. I spoke quietly. Can you prove it? Nathan answered immediately. I'm getting close. I closed my eyes. For months, I believed Brandon wanted my marriage. For months, I thought he wanted Victoria. Now I saw the truth. Victoria was never the prize. She was the doorway. The company was the prize. And Brandon had spent years positioning himself to take as much control as possible. Nathan spoke again. Ryan, I'm here. You need to be careful. Why? Because if Brandon realizes we're onto him, he won't sit still. I looked back through the hotel window. Across the room, Brandon stood beside Victoria, smiling, laughing, acting loyal, acting trustworthy, acting harmless. For the first time, I understood exactly what kind of man he was. And for the first time, I realized how dangerous he could become once his secrets were threatened. As Brandon raised his glass and smiled at the executives around him, I made a silent promise. I was done defending myself. Now I was going after him. I stopped reacting to Brandon completely. That confused him. He expected arguments. He expected frustration. He expected me to lose control. Instead, I smiled. And while he focused on humiliating me, Nathan and I focused on something much more important. Evidence. Every day, Nathan uncovered something new. One evening, he called me. You need to see this. I drove to his office immediately. Nathan handed me a folder. What am I looking at? Payment records. I opened the documents. The numbers meant nothing at first. Then Nathan pointed at several transactions. Look closer. I frowned. These payments don't make sense. Exactly. Where did the money go? Nathan leaned back. Companies connected to Brandon. I looked up. You're sure? I checked 3 times. My stomach tightened. For months, Brandon had acted like he owned the company. Now I understood why. He had been treating company resources like his personal property. And that was only the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, we found more. Unauthorized expenses, suspicious reimbursements, hidden vendor contracts. Then came the emails. Those were even worse. Nathan forwarded several messages to me. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Brandon had approved payments without authorization. He had pressured employees into ignoring procedures. He had even used company funds for personal travel. The evidence kept growing. Soon it became impossible to deny. One night, Nathan smiled for the first time in weeks. We have him. I looked at the files spread across the table. Are you sure? Absolutely. What happens now? Nathan folded his arms. Now the board gets involved. The board acted quickly, much faster than I expected. An emergency meeting was scheduled. Officially, it was described as an investor review session. Unofficially, it was something else entirely. A trap. Brandon had no idea. Neither did most executives. Only a handful of people knew the truth, including Victoria. When she first saw the evidence, she went silent. I will never forget that moment. She sat across from me, reading the documents. Page after page, email after email, transaction after transaction. Finally, she looked up. Her face had gone pale. This can't be real. It's real. Victoria shook her head. No, Victoria. He wouldn't do this. I remained quiet. For a long moment, she stared at the evidence again. Then she whispered something that hurt. Not because it was cruel, because it was honest. I should have listened to you. The day of the meeting arrived. The atmosphere felt strange. Tense. Heavy. Investors filled the conference room. Executives took their seats. Board members exchanged serious looks. I sat beside Nathan. Neither of us said much. Then Brandon arrived. Right on time. Confident as always. He walked into the room wearing an expensive suit, smiling at everyone, shaking hands, acting important. He spotted me and smirked. Ryan, Brandon, you look nervous. I smiled. Do I? A little. He laughed. Don't worry. These presentations can be intimidating. Nathan nearly laughed beside me. Brandon never noticed. He took his seat, relaxed, comfortable, completely unaware of what was coming. The meeting began. An investor presentation appeared on the screen. Brandon immediately started speaking. Confident, polished, charismatic, exactly as always. Several executives nodded along. A few investors smiled. For years, this performance had worked. Then the chairman interrupted him. That's enough. The room became quiet. Brandon blinked. Excuse me, we need to discuss something else. His smile weakened slightly. The chairman nodded toward the screen. A new document appeared. One of the financial records Nathan had uncovered. Brandon stared at it. For the first time, his confidence cracked. Only slightly. But I saw it. Everyone did. The chairman spoke calmly. Can you explain this transaction? Brandon cleared his throat. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. Another document appeared. Then another. Then another. The room grew silent. Every page revealed something worse. Unauthorized payments. Hidden expenses. Personal benefits. Misused company resources. The evidence kept coming. Victoria sat frozen. Several investors looked stunned. One executive whispered a curse under his breath. Brandon tried to recover. These numbers are being misunderstood. The chairman remained calm. Then help us understand them. Brandon opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For years, he had always known exactly what to say. Not today. The screen changed again. Emails appeared. Several board members began reading. One investor removed his glasses. Another shook his head. The chairman spoke. Did you send these messages? Brandon swallowed. Some of them. Only some. His answer never came. Because another voice interrupted. A former employee entered the room. Then another. Then another. I watched Brandon's expression change. Confusion became panic. One former manager sat down. The chairman nodded toward her. You may begin. She looked directly at Brandon. For years, she had probably feared him. Not anymore. He pressured me to approve expenses that violated company policy. Brandon immediately responded. That's not true. The woman didn't even look at him. Another employee spoke next. He threatened my position when I questioned financial reports. A third employee nodded. So did he. Then another. And another. The complaints poured out. Stories that had remained hidden for years suddenly filled the room. Employees described intimidation, manipulation, retaliation, abuse of authority. Every statement damaged Brandon further. The executives who once admired him began distancing themselves. People stopped defending him, stopped supporting him, stopped believing him. His image was collapsing in real time. It felt surreal. For years, Brandon had controlled the narrative. For years, he had convinced everyone he was indispensable. Now, that illusion was dying. Slowly, publicly, painfully, the chairman finally spoke again. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Brandon looked around the room. Nobody came to his rescue. Not a single person. He looked toward Victoria. She met his eyes, then looked away. That moment seemed to break him. His shoulders dropped. His confidence vanished. His smile disappeared completely. For the first time since I met him, he looked small, human, afraid. The chairman stood. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated. Silence filled the room. Brandon stared at him. You can't do this. We already have. You need me. No. The chairman shook his head. We really don't. Security entered moments later. Nobody protested. Nobody argued. Nobody defended him. As Brandon stood, he looked directly at me. The anger in his eyes was intense. But something else was there too. Disbelief. He genuinely never thought this would happen. He spent years provoking people. Years crossing boundaries. Years abusing power. He believed he was untouchable. He believed nobody would ever challenge him. He was wrong. As security escorted him toward the door, he stopped walking. For one brief moment, he turned around. The entire room watched him. His empire was gone. His reputation was gone. His power was gone. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction. Not revenge. Relief. Because Brandon Pierce had finally been exposed. But as the doors closed behind him, I noticed the look he gave me. It was not the look of a defeated man. It was the look of someone who had already decided this wasn't over. I expected to feel victorious after Brandon was exposed. I didn't. What I felt was exhausted. The investigation spread quickly. News traveled through the company within hours. Soon clients knew. Investors knew. Business partners knew. Everyone knew. The board released a statement. Lawyers became involved. Auditors reviewed years of records. The evidence was overwhelming. Brandon lost his position immediately. Then he lost something else. His reputation. People who once praised him stopped returning his calls. Former supporters disappeared. Professional opportunities vanished. The man who always acted powerful suddenly stood alone. Nathan called me one afternoon. Have you heard the latest? I've heard plenty. He tried contacting several executives. And they refused to meet him. I nodded slowly. Not surprising. Nathan laughed. Funny how fast loyalty disappears. It wasn't loyalty. What was it? Fear. Nathan became quiet. Then he said something interesting. You're probably right. After we ended the call, I stared out my office window. For months, I thought Brandon was my biggest problem. Now he wasn't. A different challenge stood in front of me. My marriage. The damage between Victoria and me hadn't disappeared when Brandon left. If anything, it became more visible. One evening, Victoria sat beside me on the living room couch. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, she broke the silence. I owe you an apology. I looked at her. You don't have to do this right now. Yes, I do. Her voice sounded fragile. I should have listened. I remained quiet. Victoria lowered her eyes. You warned me over and over. I did, and I ignored you. The sadness in her voice was impossible to miss. I wasn't angry anymore. They made it harder somehow. Because anger is simple. Disappointment is not. Victoria took a slow breath. I trusted Brandon. I know. I thought he was loyal. I know. I thought you were overreacting. Those words hung in the air. Painful. Honest. Real. She looked at me. I'm sorry. For the first time, I believed she truly understood what had happened. Not just financially. Emotionally. Personally. The betrayal wasn't Brandon. It was being dismissed by the person I trusted most. A week later, we started counseling. Neither of us enjoyed the idea, but both of us knew we needed it. The first session felt awkward. The counselor asked difficult questions. Questions neither of us wanted to answer. One question stayed with me. What hurt the most? I answered immediately. Not being believed. Victoria looked down. The counselor turned toward her. What do you think hurt Ryan the most? Victoria's eyes filled with tears. The same thing. Nobody spoke after that. Because there was nothing else to say. The truth had finally entered the room. Over the following months, we worked through everything. The conversations weren't easy. Some were painful. Some ended in silence. Others ended in tears. But little by little things improved. Victoria became more open. I became more patient. Trust returned slowly. Not all at once. Trust never works that way. It arrives one small piece at a time. One afternoon, my father-in-law, Richard Grant, invited me to lunch. That surprised me. Richard was a successful businessman, a demanding man, not someone who often discussed feelings. When we sat down, he studied me for a moment. Then he said something unexpected. I owe you an apology. I almost laughed. Apparently, it's apology season. A small smile appeared on his face. Maybe. I leaned back. What did I do? You were right. I blinked. About Brandon? Richard nodded. I underestimated you. Those words carried weight. Coming from him, they meant something. He continued. I thought you were being emotional. I smiled slightly. So, did Victoria? Yes. Richard sighed. I believe Brandon was an asset. A lot of people did. But you kept your composure. I remembered every insult, every public humiliation, every moment Brandon tried to provoke me. I wasn't always calm inside. That doesn't matter. Richard pointed toward me. What matters is that you stayed in control. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he added something I never expected. I'm proud of how you handled it. Hearing those words felt strangely meaningful. More meaningful than I wanted to admit. Several months passed. Life slowly returned to normal. The company recovered. Employees regained confidence. The constant tension disappeared. One evening, Victoria and I sat on our back porch watching the sunset. The air felt peaceful. For once, neither of us had work on our minds. Victoria reached for my hand. Then she spoke quietly. You know what keeps bothering me? What? The signs. I looked at her. What signs? All the things I ignored. She shook her head. There were so many. I squeezed her hand. You can't change the past. I know. Victoria looked at me. But I still wish I had listened. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I watched the fading sunlight. Then she said the words I had waited months to hear. You were trying to protect us. My chest tightened. Not from anger. Not from sadness. From relief. Because she finally understood. Not partially. Completely. She understood that every concern I raised came from love. Not jealousy. Not insecurity. Not control. Love. Victoria smiled sadly. And I pushed you away. You were manipulated too. Maybe. She shook her head. But I still made the choice. For a moment, we sat in silence. Then I smiled. We made it through. She smiled back. Yes, we did. That conversation gave me more satisfaction than Brandon's downfall ever could. More than the investigation. More than the board meeting. More than watching his reputation collapse. Because revenge was never what I truly wanted. I wanted my wife to understand me. And now she did. Looking back, I finally saw the entire story clearly. Brandon believed strength came from intimidation. From arrogance. From making other people feel small. That was why he failed. Real strength is different. Real strength means staying calm when someone wants a reaction. It means remaining patient when people doubt you. It means trusting the truth even when nobody else can see it yet. Brandon never understood that. He thought power made him untouchable. He thought manipulation made him smarter than everyone else. Most importantly, he thought he understood me. He didn't. Not even close. Because while he spent years trying to break me, I spent those same years becoming stronger. And in the end, the person Brandon failed to understand was the one person who brought everything crashing down. Me.